Good morning, everyone. My name is Randy Benny, and I'm one of the tech integrators here for the district and also one of the facilitators for this morning's Google Classroom Advanced session. A couple of housekeeping items before I turn it over to my partner, Julia. First of all, this meeting is being recorded, and we are doing so that we can create a video to share out with you after the fact. You can go back and watch and rewind and watch it again at your own pace to help you learn. We'd also like you to mute your microphone if you have not already done so, and that you can do by moving your mouse towards the bottom center of the screen. You should see 3 buttons. The button on the left is the microphone button. When you click it, it should turn red, indicating the microphone is off. We ask that you keep your microphone off during the entire session. That way we can proceed with minimal interruptions. If you do have a question once we get started, we ask that you type that question in the chat. You will find the chat button in the upper right-hand corner. It's a white button with a gray text box. Speaking of the chat, at this time, I can see some people are doing this. We ask you to click on there and type your first and last name. That way you will be able to record yourself for attendance for today's session. Julia and I will record you in my learning plan so that you get credit for today's professional learning, and then we can move on from there. Last thing to do before we get started, we'd like to thank you for attending today's advanced training on Google Classroom. We are going to cover adjusting the settings for Classroom, the Drive folder, providing feedback, and setting up a Google Meet. We will not advise what is expected in terms of content in the Google Classroom, nor how to communicate it out to families. Since we are not assessing at this time, we are not going to be touching on the different grading features that are available. Please direct any questions in those areas to your building administrator. Please also note that this course is not part of the Google Certified Educator Plan. That is a self-paced program offered through Google. There is no exam at the end of today's session, nor does this session completely prepare you for the exam. Please refrain from replying to one another in the chat sessions. I'm going to be moderating the chat, and I will respond to questions in the chat, or I will do so out loud if I feel it'll benefit the group. But if people are responding to one another in the chat, that may cause me to miss a question. So we ask that you do not type anything in the chat other than your first and last name or questions once you have them. I believe I have covered everything there, so I'm going to stop presenting my screen and turn it over to Julia.
Good morning. My name is Julia Evji, and I am a tech integrator for the district. My job in today's session will be sharing my screen. So in a few moments, you'll stop seeing my face, and then you're going to start to see everything that I do on Google Classroom. My suggestion for you is to just simply watch the screen. You can take down notes if you want, but remember, we're going to share this as a resource with you later on for you to review. Please do not try to recreate what I'm doing in Google Classroom on my screen on your device. I think going back and forth like that might get you lost and you might miss some information. So instead, sit back, relax, watch me do all the work on Google Classroom, and really start to think about what you can use Google Classroom for with your students. So to get started, I just want to touch base on what is Google Classroom. Google Classroom is a learning management system that simplifies creating, distributing, and grading assignments in a paperless way. Basically, it streamlines the process of sharing files between teachers and students. So right now, I'm going to turn off my camera, and you are going to start seeing my screen. And the first thing that you're going to see is this blue ClassLink Launchpad. Can you just verify that, Randy?
Yes, that's what I see.
Perfect. So we encourage staff as well as students to always access Google Classroom from this blue ClassLink Launchpad. And to do that, you're going to go to Google Apps and then find Google Classroom. This brings you to your main Google Classroom page. Another option for accessing Google Classroom is here from your RUSD Gmail account. You have this waffle icon in the top right corner. Here you'll see all of your Google apps. You just want to scroll and find Google Classroom. Click on that and it brings you to the same place, this main Google Classroom screen. So the first thing that you'll notice are the classes that I am a part of. And each class is represented by this tile. If you click on the tile, it opens up that Google Classroom. So I'm a part of lots of Google Classrooms, so I have lots of tiles on my screen right now. If you have created a Google Classroom and you are the owner of that classroom, the main teacher, you'll see a tile for that class. If you've been invited to be a teacher as a Google Classroom participant, you're going to show up here on this main Google Classroom screen. And if you've been invited to be a student in a Google Classroom, you'll also see that Google Classroom here on the main screen. Now, if you wanted to rearrange these tiles or these classes to make it easier for you to see, all you have to do is click on the tile and simply drag it to a new location. I want to bring your attention to these 3 horizontal lines on the left-hand side of your screen. When I click on these 3 horizontal lines, you'll see a sidebar appears. Here, all of those classes that I'm a part of will show up in a list, and they're broken up into teaching and enrolled. So here in this teaching section, you'll see all of the classes that I'm either the main teacher of or that I've been invited to be a co-teacher of. Here in this enrolled section, I'm a student. So these are Google Classrooms that I'm considered a student in. If you've been invited to a Google Classroom as part of professional learning, maybe you would see one of those Google Classrooms down here. I want to bring your attention to a feature that appears only in this sidebar, and that is this to-do feature. So when I click on this as a teacher, I'm going to see all of the Google Classrooms that I'm a teacher of, as well as all of the assignments that are currently assigned to those students. This is a great overview page so that you can see, again, what classes that you're teaching and what assignments you have assigned. Now, I'm part of a lot of Google Classrooms, so this usually just takes a moment to load. Here we go. So I like telling teachers about this to-do section because it's a time-saving feature. Rather than opening up each Google Classroom, trying to find what assignments are upcoming and due, you can just simply use this to-do section for a great overview. So let's take a look at what we see. The first thing that I'll see is this class right here. It's Mrs. Nikolick's class, and she has assigned some art lessons to her students. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see some numbers. So 25 students have been assigned this art lesson, and only 1 student has turned in the art lesson. Now you'll notice when I move my cursor over those numbers, it turns blue. And that's because this is actually a shortcut. So if I would click on those numbers, it's going to open up that Google Classroom and show me that assignment so that I could easily give my students a grade or some sort of feedback. Again, this to-do section is just a good overview of everything that you have assigned in all of your Google Classrooms. Now, once you've given some feedback to your students, maybe you've even given them a grade, these assignments will move up here to the reviewed section. So here I can click on the reviewed section, and if I graded that student work, it would be here showing me that I'm done with it. I have already reviewed it. In the reviewed section, as well as the to review section, you have this option for all classes. When you click on this dropdown, you can actually choose just one Google Classroom to look at. So let me do that. And now I only see assignments for this one Google Classroom. Here are all the assignments on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, it's giving me information, how many students were assigned and how many students have turned that in. Going back to the 3 horizontal lines, if I scroll down to this enrolled section, here I'm a student, you'll see that students also have a to-do option. So again, your students are going to be able to see what assignments have been given to them, all in one place. It shows them the name of the Google Classroom as well as the assignment. They also have the option to click on this All Classes dropdown, And then they could just specifically look at one Google Classroom and what assignments are due in that one particular Google Classroom. Once the students have completed the work, they've turned it in on Google Classroom, it will show up in this Done tab. When I click on the Done tab, I can see that I, as the student, have turned in these assignments. If you work with older students and you want to encourage them to take charge of their learning, to be a little more responsible and know what's coming and what's upcoming and due, I would encourage them to look at this to-do section as a student, again, to get a good general overview of their assignments and when they are due. Going back to the 3 horizontal lines, I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom and talk about the settings. Now, these settings apply to all of my Google Classrooms. You probably have noticed that as soon as you start a Google Classroom, you're going to get automatic email notifications from Google Classroom telling you any sort of activity that's going on. In the settings, you can actually customize these email notifications. So you want to scroll down and you can see how you can customize these emails. You'll get emails based on comments, classes that you're enrolled in, as well as classes that you teach. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see these little toggle buttons. If the toggle is blue, that means it's on. Yes, you will receive emails for that type of notification. If it's gray, the toggle is off. No, you will not receive emails for that type of notification. So I can just simply click on these toggles to turn them on or off, and this allows me to customize the type of emails that I want to receive. At the very bottom, it says class notifications. Here I can click on the dropdown and I can pick and choose which specific Google Classrooms I want to be notified about. Again, using these toggles, clicking on them gray turns them off, and blue means that they are on. You'll know that during this time of distance learning, you have been asked to add an administrator as well as an instructional coach to be part of your Google Classroom. If you are an administrator or an instructional coach, and your email is filling up with these type of Google Classroom notifications, this setting might be for you. Here at the top, I can turn off all email notifications from Google Classroom. So clicking on this top toggle, turning it off, you'll notice that I do not have any more customization options underneath because I have simply turned off all email notifications. Be aware this is something that you have to do on your own Google Classroom. As an administrator, you cannot ask your staff members to turn off these emails for you. It's something that you need to do. Okay, moving right along, we're going to go back to that main Google Classroom screen. And here I'm going to pick one of my Google Classrooms to demo for you today. So let me open up a Google Classroom. All I have to do is click on this tile near the title. And now I am in my Google Classroom named Demo Class. Let's talk about the settings that are specific to this demo class. To access the settings, you're going to click on the gear icon in the top right corner. I'm going to scroll down to this general section and talk about a few of these items. So the first item is the class code. You know that there are 2 ways to invite students to join a Google Classroom. One of those ways is to use the class code. Here's where you can find the class code. If you click on the code drop-down, you have some more options. You can display the code. This is a nice option when we're in our physical classrooms and you are projecting your laptop to your students. Here they would be able to see the code and copy it down. You can make the code even larger by using this full screen button in the bottom right-hand corner. And now the code is even larger, it's full screen. Clicking on this drop-down again, I have the option to copy the class code. So here I would copy the code, Maybe I want to email my students the code, so I could open up an email and paste that code in the email. I can reset the code. Let's say I just sent out that email and I don't want that code to be active anymore. I would need to come here to my settings and choose reset. Finally, you can disable the code. If you don't want that code to be active at all, you're not interested in the code, you would choose disable. Next, we're going to talk about the stream. By default, it says students can post and comment. That means students can go into their Google Classroom, type anything that they want, share any images that they want or any files, and all of the students in the Google Classroom will see that, as well as the teachers. It's my suggestion that when you start using Google Classroom, you always come here to your settings and you change this. I would suggest clicking on the drop-down and changing it to only teachers can post and comment. This is just a safeguard. So I'm going to change this setting. Then I would explain to my students what my expectations are of them. I would make it very clear that Google Classroom is a learning tool. It is not a social platform, and they should not be just communicating with their friends on it for fun. Once I feel my students understand my expectations, I've given them maybe like a week to get comfortable with Google Classroom. Then I could come back to my settings, clicking on this and changing it to students can post and comment. Now, you might want to consider how your students are going to interact with Google Classroom. If you want them to be an active participant and you do want them having those online discussions that are educational, you would need to make sure that it's changed to students can post and comment. If you think you're just going to use Google Classroom as a place for students to go and grab resources, you could just always keep this as only teachers can post and comment. It's really how you plan on using Google Classroom. And the last setting that I want to talk about is this classwork on the stream. So each time that you post an assignment or a material, it will also appear as a notification on the stream. If you feel the stream is too overwhelming for you and your students, or you prefer they just don't see these notifications, you could change the setting. Here, I would click on my drop-down and I would choose Hide Notifications. I know a lot of teachers who work with younger students, 4K, probably up through first or second grade, they just like to turn the stream off so that their students aren't overwhelmed. Again, this is up to you. Okay, so I'm going to click Save on my settings right now. We're going to come back to settings a little bit later. And next, we're going to talk about some features of Google Classroom that were automatically created when you started this Google Classroom. So the first feature is a Classroom Drive folder. When you and your students connect to Google Classroom automatically creates a folder structure in your Google Drive. You can access your Classroom Drive folder from a few places. The first place is from this Classwork tab. Here in my Classwork tab, at the top, I'll see Class Drive folder. If I click on this, it brings me to my RUSD Google Drive. So here I can see that I'm in my drive. A folder was created called Classroom, and then inside that folder is a folder called Demo Class. That's what I named this Google Classroom. I can see that folders inside represent assignments that I have shared with my students. So if I open up this folder for an assignment, here I'll see a copy of the assignment that was shared with my students. Remember, this folder structure was created in your drive as well as your students' drive. Another place that you can access that Classroom Drive folder is from that main Google Classroom screen. Remember when I was talking about each class looks like a tile? In the bottom right-hand corner of the tile, you'll see an icon that looks like a file folder. If you click on that, it's going to open up to that same place. Again, I'm in my drive. Here's a folder called Classroom, and here's a folder called Demo Class for my Google Classroom. It's really important that you do not reorganize these folders in your Google Drive. Let Google Classroom do the organization for you. If you delete or move folders around, you could mess up Google Classroom's organization. So remember when I said Google Classroom is a way to streamline the process of sharing files? That's what's happening right here in this Classroom Drive folder. Okay, we're going to go back to our demo class and talk about one other feature that was created automatically, and that is a Google Calendar. So Google Calendar is integrated into Google Classroom. And this means it makes it really easy for teachers and students to see assignment due dates in one location. Each assignment with a due date will automatically be added to your classroom's Google Calendar. You can access your classroom's Google Calendar from a few places. The first is the Classwork tab. Here at the top, you'll see a Google Calendar icon. If I click on this, it will bring me to my RUSD Google Calendar. Now, in purple are all events that I have added to my RUSD Google Calendar. But in black, you'll see something that was created as part of my Google Classroom. So here on Friday, May 15th, I have an assignment for my Google Classroom called Math Quiz. Again, this was added automatically as soon as I created that assignment with a due date. It shows up here on the calendar. Now, if you click on the 3 horizontal lines in your Google Calendar, in this sidebar, you can see all of the calendars that are currently displayed. So here's that demo class. Again, it matches the name of my Google Classroom. It's represented by black as the event colors. If I click on this check mark, you'll notice that the event disappears. So I'll click and I'll no longer see that event. I can click again to show the check mark, and now I will see those events. If you're simply not interested in having this Google Classroom calendar show up on your Google Calendar, you can click on the X that's next to the name of the calendar. When you click on that X, it's going to prompt you to remove the calendar, and then you would click remove. If you do end up removing this calendar and you want it to come back later, that is an option. It's just another step. You also can access your Google Calendar for this class by clicking on those 3 horizontal lines and choose Calendar right here. So now this Google Calendar looks a little bit different. It doesn't have my personal RUSD events that I've manually added. Instead, it only shows events, again, with a due date. So here on Friday, May 15th is that math quiz. I have another Google Classroom that has a due date showing up on Wednesday, May 13th. So this is going to show all of my classes. I can click on this All Classes option and then only show events for this one Google Classroom. Now remember, your students have access to this also. So again, if you're working with those older students, you want them to be a little bit more organized and independent. Remind them that they can click on the 3 horizontal lines, choose calendar, and then they can see everything that has the due date in this calendar view. They would also have an RUSD calendar like I showed you before. So back in my demo class, the next thing I want to talk about is this theme right here, or this image. By default, this image was just added to my Google Classroom. And I have the option to change this image. So I can change the image by clicking on Select Theme. And here, Google has some pre-made themes for me to choose from. They're usually educational based, and I can find one that even matches the type of teaching that I do. So let's say I'm an art teacher. I specifically teach music. So here I could click on this music theme and then change my theme. So just a way to customize it. I could also upload a picture. So I'll click right here where it says upload photo. Here I need to choose a picture from my computer. So I just so happen to have an image here. I'll open that up. Now you'll notice that that theme is a specific size and shape. It's pretty long and narrow, like a rectangle. So this photo will not show up. I'm going to have to click and drag to select a region. So only part of that photo is going to display as my theme. Once I'm happy with that, I can hit the blue select class theme. And now I'll see that image has changed. Now, the reason that I point this out to you as a feature of Google Classroom is having an image that matches what you teach is going to be a way to support your students. Remember, our students can be invited to multiple Google Classrooms. So having an image and sticking with it is really going to ensure your students are in the correct Google Classroom. This is especially important for our early learners. I always encourage teachers to pick a basic image for those kiddos. So like pencils or jelly beans. And then when I'm teaching those younger students to log into Google Classroom, I always say, okay, make sure you see the jelly beans. And then it just gives them confidence they're in the correct place. So you might want to consider choosing a theme based off of your classroom. You'll also notice here in the theme, you have access to that class code that I was talking about in the settings. This is just a shortcut. Again, you can click on the code to display it. If you want to make it nice and large, you would click on this full screen option for your students to copy it down. It's just a shortcut. Okay, so next we're going to talk about an assignment in Google Classroom. And what I want to show you right now is an assignment, and I want to show you the teacher view compared to the student view for this assignment. That's a question that I get a lot from teachers is, well, how are my students going to interact with it, or how does it look? So I'm just picking one basic example today of how you can make an assignment. I'm going to be the teacher in this Google Classroom, and Randy's actually going to be the student behind the scenes. So we're going to do our best right now to show you that teacher view versus the student view. And we're also going to give you some options for adding feedback to your assignments. So let's take a look at that. So I want to click on the Classwork tab. And here I'm just going to very quickly create an assignment. I want to make a reading response journal for my student to fill out. I'm going to click on this add button and find something from my Google Drive. I already have a reading response journal ready, so I just need to find it. And here it is. It's actually a Google Doc. So I'll select that file and click add. And now I can see the Google Doc is part of this assignment. Now, by default, it says students can view file. But I want my students to actually write on the file or edit the file because look, it's a journal. And right now, if they're just able to view the file, they won't be able to interact with it. So I'm going to choose on this dropdown and do make a copy for each student. This is really important. Teachers often forget to make this change. If you want your students to be able to write on the document and have their own digital copy, you need to change this to make a copy for each student. So now what Google is going to do is Google is going to make a copy of this, and it's actually going to change the title and insert your student's name. So when Randy would open this up, it's going to say Randy Reading Response Journal. And then Randy will have access, and I will as well, because remember, we have that Google Drive structure and we're sharing files between teachers and students. Okay, so this looks ready. I'm going to go ahead and click Assign. And here it is. It says Reading Response Journal. So I can click on this to expand. And this is the original Google Doc. If I click on this, it will bring me to the original. But I want to see my students' copies. So I need to choose View Assignment. And when I view the assignment, you'll see that I'm in this student work view right now. So here's the name of the assignment, Reading Response Journal. I have 2 students in this demo Google Classroom, so only 2 students have this assigned and 0 students have turned this in. On the left-hand side of my screen, I can see a list of my students' names. and they're underneath this category of assigned, because again, no one has turned it in yet. At the very top of the screen, you'll see there's a total point value. Remember, during the time of distance learning, we are not to grade anything that we give our students. So I'm just going to leave this alone. My students can still interact with the assignment without having a grade. If you're interested in the grading features of Google Classroom now or in the fall, reach out to your building's tech integrator and they can explain to you some of these features. Remember, I chose make a copy for each student, and that shows up right here. So here are my two students, and here's Randy's copy of the Reading Response Journal, and here's my other student's copy of the Reading Response Journal. Now, what I want to do right now is open up one of my students' files. So I can just click right here, and now I'm in a new tab. And this is a way that you can show and give feedback to your students. So right now I can see that Randy is actually working on his assignment. His cursor is here in pink. You can see it moving around, and he as the student is filling out this assignment. Now, this is an awesome classroom management technique. If you're in your physical classroom and your students are out at their desks working on a device, as the teacher, when you're logged into Google Classroom, you can open up each student's assignment and see them working in real time. It's a great way to make sure that they're focused and on task and that they're not just playing around on their device. Okay, so Randy is done filling in his Reading Response Journal. So I want to talk to you right now about some feedback that you can give your students. So let's look at the screen. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can tell that I'm in this grading section. So again, you could type in a point value that you want to give your student, but we're not to grade during this time of distance learning, so I'm going to skip that. You could give your student a private comment. So I could say something like, keep up the good work. Oops. And this will show up on his student side of Google Classroom, which I'll show you in a few minutes. This comment, when I click post, will not show up here on the document. It's going to show up on the student's Google Classroom. Okay, so giving a grade and a private comment is one option. You can also give your students comments specific to the document right here. So I'm going to click on this icon. It kind of looks like a speech bubble, and this is actually a comment bank. So if you have some comments that you use over and over again when grading, you might want to consider adding them to your comment bank. This is a really nice time-saving feature. Once you add these comments to your comment bank, they're actually going to be accessible in all of your Google Classrooms. So if I make it right here in my demo class and I go and open up another Google Classroom, I'll still have these same comments. To add a comment to the comment bank, you're going to click on this blue plus button. And here you could type in text, but you can also add a link. So I like this for students who need to go back and review something as part of their editing. Let's say that I have students who need to review some MLA formatting about quotations. So here I found this website. All I have to do is copy the website. Back here, I'm going to type in my comment. So this is all about quotations. And then next to that text, I'm going to paste in the website. And now I'll click add. So over here, I now have that as part of my comment bank. Now let's give Randy a comment on his Google Doc. To do that, I need to select some part of his document. So I need to click and drag on top. I see that he needs to capitalize this part of his text. So now I want to click on this comment with a plus sign. And here you'll see my name appear, and I could type in a comment for Randy. But I can also use one of those comments from the comment bank. So over here, I would need to click on the 3 vertical dots and choose copy to clipboard. Then I'm going to come over here to my comment and paste that in. But I think that's a lot of back and forth. I'm going to show you a shortcut right now. If you type in the hashtag symbol or the pound symbol by using the keys on your keyboard, watch what happens. Once I have that hashtag, a list appears of all of those comments from my comment bank. All I have to do is click on it, and the comment has been added. Now I'll click on the blue comment button, and my student will see this comment when they log in. So on his Google Doc, he's going to see my comment over here on the side. Your students will also receive an email notification telling them that you have commented on their assignment. Again, all you have to do is click and drag on top of some part of the text. Click on that comment feature. If you use the hashtag, you're going to see a list of all of your comments come up. Let me show you how this one looks with that website link. So now my student can actually click on this link. It's live and it works, and it's going to open up that website for them to review. There you go. So besides adding comments as feedback, you can actually directly edit your students' work right here on the assignment. And to edit their work, you need to change this dropdown from suggesting to edit. So now, because remember, Randy and I both have access to this document, I can actually make changes that will stick and that Randy will see and I will see. So what I want to do right now is just do a little formatting fix for him. I can see that down here, this text should not be bold. So I'm going to click and select the text. And then I have some formatting tools up at the top. To see more of them, I need to click on these three dots. And here I can see this text is bold. All I want to do is click that so that it no longer is bold. And that text is now formatted correctly. If you're working with younger students, sometimes, let's just be honest, it's easier to make a fix for them rather than having them go back in themselves. So you might want to use this editing mode and just make a few little changes if necessary. Back when we're in our physical classrooms, we know that the Chromebooks do not allow students to print. So if you wanted to print an assignment for your students from Google Classroom, I would be here in this grading mode, and I can see I have the option to print. Now, let's say before I print, again, I just see one little formatting issue. Again, I could be in this editing mode, make that change very quickly, and then go ahead and print my students' work. So some additional time-saving features that you'll notice on this screen is the first, you're seeing one student's work, right? So this is Randy's work, and it says it was assigned to him. If I click on this drop-down, I can see all of my other students in my class, and I can actually sort them by first name. I can sort them by last name, ascending or descending order. Later on, I can even sort them by status. So who has turned this in versus who has been assigned this. Now, if I want to really quickly switch to another student, I can just click on their name here, and then this student's assignment appears. Again, I have all of those same feedback options. I can give comments, I can give them a grade, private comment, I can suggest, or I can edit something for my student. You could also use these arrows right here to toggle back and forth between students. This is a great time-saving feature if you're trying to grade or give feedback for 25 kids in Google Classroom. Just use these arrows and you can quickly go through your students. Okay, so Randy is done working on his assignment, and I want to talk to you next about the turn-in option. Now, I can still always go in and look at Randy's work, whether he has turned it in or not. But if you want to encourage your students to turn in work, just be aware that they will lose access. Once they hit that turn in button, they can no longer type on the document. They can't make any changes because they've turned it in. Once Randy turns in his assignment, I can return it to him. But right now, this return button is gray because, again, he hasn't turned it in to me yet. So right now, we're going to switch to the student view, and talk about how that looks differently, and then I'll come back to this return button. So here's Randy's student view. He opened up this Google Doc and he was filling out the text. Here he saw that I gave him that comment, reminding him to capitalize his work. Now, if Randy is in the Google Doc at the same time that I am, he's going to notice that. Just like I could see his cursor moving, he could see mine as the teacher moving. And he can even see my little picture right up here in the corner, and it's bold with a circle around it. So that means I was in this document at the same time as Randy. Now, if Randy is ready to turn in his work, he would click right here in the upper right-hand corner, this Turn In button. He should not hit the Share button. Remember, I already have access to this file, so there's no reason for him to share it with me. You might want to encourage your students to only use the Turn In button. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of extra files. So just remind them to hit Turn In right here in the top right corner. On Randy's student view of his Google Classroom, here's how the assignment looked. It says Reading Response Journal. Here, he clicked on his version of the Google Doc. Remember, it named it for him, Randy Reading Response Journal. He can also click the Turn In button right here from the Google Classroom. And then I gave him that private comment, keep up the good work. This is where it appears. It didn't show up on the Google Doc. Instead, it just appears on his student view in his Google Classroom. So right now, behind the scenes, I'm going to ask Randy to turn in his work. And that way I can switch to the teacher view again, and I can show you how this looks different. So Randy turned in his work like a great student that he is. And here is that classwork view. My numbers have changed. Now it says that one student has this assigned and one student has turned it in. On the left-hand side of my screen, I'll see two categories now, a turned in category with Randy's name underneath, and the assigned category with my other student underneath. Here's that private comment that I gave to Randy underneath his name. And you'll also notice that giving him points is now a bold, dark color. It's kind of alerting me that that's an option now, that I can give him points because he has turned this in. But remember, you don't have to add points. Your students can still interact with the assignment if you just leave that blank. Here are their files. Now underneath Randy's, it says turned in. Let's go ahead and open up his Google Doc. And now I can see next to his name, it says turned in. If I click on that drop down, again, I'll see all of my students in my class, and I can sort them by turned in versus assigned. Now the return button is blue. I now can return this work, which means I will give Randy back his access. Once he hits turn in, he loses that access. In order for him to make any changes, you as the teacher have to remember to click on this return button. So I hope that little demonstration gave you an overview of what it's like for the teacher view versus the student view. One suggestion that I have for teachers who are starting out with Google Classroom is to make a fake Google Classroom, kind of like how I did here, and then pick a colleague to be the student. That way you and the colleague can discuss how that teacher view and that student view look differently, and that will help you become more comfortable with the platform. Just a few more things that we want to go over today. One of those options is in the People tab. So in my People tab, I'll see that my students' names are listed underneath this section. And I have some additional options that I can use when working with students. I can select my student's name by clicking on the check mark next to it, and then I'll see this Actions drop down. When I click on Actions, I can email my student. This is a great time-saving feature. When I click this email button, you'll notice that my RUSD Gmail opens up in a new tab. And it's even going to start an email for you with the student's name in the To section. So the student will receive the email from your RUSD Gmail account, not from Google Classroom. Okay, clicking on that check mark and my drop down again, I can remove the student. So let's say that the student leaves your class and they transfer to another class period. You would click here and remove the student so they would no longer be a part of your Google Classroom. You can also mute the student. Now, when you mute the student, they can still turn in their work, but they can't reply to their classmates and they can't comment or post. So before I showed you those settings that controlled all of the students' abilities to post or comment, but here you could just manually change one student's ability by muting them. So let's say they're just misbehaving, they're being inappropriate. You gave them warnings. You're going to say to them, okay, unfortunately, you're going to be temporarily muted from Google Classroom. So I would click on mute. This little speaker symbol with a line through it is going to appear next to my student's name, reminding them that I've muted them. Again, their access is going to change. And then after some time has passed, I feel like they can behave appropriately again. I can go ahead and let them have access by clicking on that check mark, choosing the drop down, and unmuting them. I want to confirm that they should be unmuted, and then that image disappears. They now have their full access back to Google Classroom. So a classroom management technique to be aware of. Next to my student's name, you'll see this option to invite guardians. Now, if you click on this invite guardians option, you can type in the name or email address of a guardian. And all you're really doing is associating that email address with your student in Google Classroom. You are not giving the guardian access to Google Classroom. The guardian will not see the stream or the classwork or anything that's actually posted in the Google Classroom. Be aware that it's really important you only add guardians who are listed in Infinite Campus. So even though you know grandma is the one who does homework with the student, you see grandma during pickup time, unless grandma is the guardian listed in Infinite Campus, you cannot add grandma's email address here. So we just want to be aware of our students' privacy. So if you do choose to invite guardians, that's optional. Their email address will appear right here. And then you have an option in your settings that applies to the guardians. So I'm going to go over here to my settings, clicking on that gear icon. And here you can see guardian summaries. So if you turn this feature on and you have those emails associated with that student in your classroom, the guardians can receive a summary of their students' work and class announcements. This comes in an automated email from Google Classroom. You don't have to do anything. I can show you how that looks. We're going to look at an example right now. So here is a student, and this student has a weekly summary. So the parent shows weekly notifications. So here's the student's work. Anything that's missing will show up. Anything that's due next week. And then this student is part of multiple Google Classrooms. So the parent is going to get this summary for all of the Google Classrooms that they're part of, as long as the teacher turned this on in the setting. So here is activity from his US history class. Here's his American literature class. And here's the marine biology class. Again, just a summary, an overview of all that's happening in Google Classroom for a parent to see. If you choose to use that feature, you're going to have to turn it on. Okay, now to the most exciting feature of Google Classroom. This is a relatively new feature. It came out within a month or so. And this is the ability for Google Meet to interact with Google Classroom. So you would need to come here to your settings first, and you'll see this Meet icon. And you want to click this toggle on so that this link to Google Meet is visible to students. So I'm going to hit save and show you how that looks. Now, the teachers and the students will see this Meet link in two places. The first place is the classwork tab. So up at the top, you'll see this camera icon for Meet. If I click on this, it's going to automatically start the Meet for me. You'll also see this in your stream. So here underneath the class code, you actually have a link to the Meet. Again, all you have to do is click on this and it's going to open up the Meet for you. So this is a time-saving feature. Rather than going into your calendar and creating a Google Meet, all you have to do is turn that setting on, and now you'll always have a link for meeting with your students. But this is a special link, and it's only here in Google Classroom that this works. Okay, so don't get confused with Calendar. If you use this link in Google Classroom and your students try to click on it, they will get kicked out unless you are there first. So this is a safeguard feature. I, as the teacher, have to click on this link first. I have to click on this Join Now button. And as soon as I click on the Join Now button, my students will then be able to join the meeting. This means you're not going to have students unaccompanied by an adult being goofy with each other before you join the meeting. Again, this is a safeguard feature. It only works with this link in Google Classroom. You as the teacher need to start the meeting first, and then your students can join. I just want to mention here that it's best practice to always be the last person to leave as well. So if your students are, if you're done talking with your students, I would say to them, okay, thanks for joining today. We're done meeting. I'm going to need you to leave the Meet. So they would just close and leave. If for some reason they do not follow those directions, in Google Meet, you have the option to remove a participant. So I would go ahead and use that remove button. And then once all of my students are gone, then I can close the Meet. I want to be the last to leave because then my kids can't come back and try to meet without me. So it's kind of like your classroom. You want to be the first one there and the last to leave. Same thing with the Meet link in Google Classroom. That's really important. Now, I'm not going to go over the features of Google Meet. We actually have a separate course listed in my learning plan for that. It's 30 minutes long, and we go over how to mute the participants, how to share your screen, all those types of features. What I just wanted to do today is show you that, yes, Google Classroom can interact with Google Meet. And then I'm going to give you one example on how you might use Google Meet in your Google Classroom right now. So a lot of teachers ask me, can I meet with a small group of students? Yes, you can do that. Just like you would meet with a small reading group in your classroom or perhaps an intervention group, we can recreate that digitally here in your Google Classroom. But it's not perfect. So let me explain that. The first thing that I would do is I would create an announcement. So here I am on my stream, and this is my announcement. And I would tell my students, we're having a Google Meet at 2 p.m. Okay. And then what you can see right here is this drop down for all students. This is where you're going to choose that small group of students. So let's say I only want to meet with one student. So I'll click on that student and I'm going to meet with Randy right now. And when I hit post, only Randy is going to see this announcement. So I've only communicated to him that at 2 o'clock, we're going to have a meeting. A few minutes before 2 o'clock, I, as the teacher, will log into my Google Classroom and I'll click on that link. Remember, I have to click join. And then as soon as Randy comes in and he clicks on that link, he will be able to join because I was there first. Now, I said this isn't perfect. And that means if any other student in my classroom just happens to log in around 2 o'clock and they get curious and they click on that Meet link, they'll be able to join the classroom as well because Randy and I are in it already. And if that happens, I would just say to my student, hey, I'm sorry, I'm having a small group meeting right now. I'm going to need you to leave. Again, if they don't leave, use that feature of Google Meet where you can remove the participant. And then once they're removed, you can continue with your small group meeting. So that means this link can always be accessible by your students. You can't make it specific for specific students. But what you could do is what I showed. You can make an announcement, only tell specific students about it, and then meet with that small group of students. So I hope that kind of explained to you how Google Meet interacts with Google Classroom. That is the end of my part of the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to Randy.
We're up to date on the chat. We had some great questions out there today, so I hope you've all been following along. What I'm going to share on the screen right now is a list of the 6 tech integrators for the district and the schools with which they are affiliated. And if you are unsure who your tech integrator is, take a look at the list and see what matches you. If you're an itinerant staff member, then you can pick any one of the buildings that you work at. I'd also like to share out some information about InfoSec. It's a partner with the district to help us stay informed on cybersecurity and safety issues. There is a link on ClassLink, and also you should have been receiving emails from them periodically as to how to stay safe online and protect yourself from problems. If you have any further questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and we will do our best to answer them as we wrap up today's session. Otherwise, if you feel you've had your fill of Google Classroom for today, you are welcome to leave the session. You can do so by clicking on the red end call button in the bottom center of the screen, or you can just close the tab. Either way, we thank you for attending and have a great day.